Welcome, 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 everyone. This is the Crossroads and Catalyst podcast with Shanita B. I am your host, where we discuss the right perspective at a crossroads can be the catalyst which changes your trajectory. So today, I have a really special guest with me. She has agreed to be interviewed by me for this podcast, and she has a lot of really good and insightful, relevant experience. Though she is currently retired, she has 40 plus years as an executive in the healthcare industry. And so I am going to turn it over to my good friend, Barb O, so that she can give us a little bit more background. Barb, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really happy that you're here. So give us a little bit about what you've experienced over the course of your career, your background.
Okay, well, thank you, Shanita. I'm just very honored to be here. Um, just, I'll try to make it brief. 40 years is a long time. I could write a book. So I'll try to make it short and sweet. I actually started in the healthcare industry in insurance, and I worked for a non-investor owned branch of one of the Blue Cross Blue Shields. And then over time, that Blue Cross Blue Shield was acquired by what I call the mothership, a larger Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so it became 5 Blue Cross Blue Shields. I retired from there, took an early retirement, and really wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. And then all of a sudden, I ended up being in executive leadership for a health benefit administrator, third-party administrator. And then I went to work as an executive for a property and casualty company, which was fascinating to me because I had not really delved into property and casualty. And then to round it all out, my career ended up working on the provider side for 2 different hospitals. And of course, one of the hospitals, I started working February 28th, and lo and behold, the next week, COVID hit at the hospital. So that was kind of interesting. So that's how my career trajectory kind of went down a strange path. So at the end of the day, I think it was time for me to say vamoose. But since then, I have performed some consulting work, and that has been fun. It's been a good 40 years.
Well, you've definitely seen quite a bit, and I also know that your specialty is operations. So you've done a lot with operations and coming in to make processes more efficient, optimizing workflows. And I can speak from experience because I've seen you work, maybe not specifically in the corporate setting, but just knowing you and having spent a lot of time with you, I definitely know you have a knack for calling out things that are not working well and putting them together. So I think that is really very helpful experience.
Thanks.
So thanks for coming on and giving us that background. Well, as you know, part of the purpose for this podcast is to help people to think through their circumstances when they reach a crossroads within their career,
Right.
with the hopes of taking whatever experience that they have at that point and using that challenge as a catalyst to push them forward to the next stage or phase of their career. So what I would like to start with is asking you specifically, can you share a pivotal moment in your career where you realized you were at a crossroads?
Absolutely. I think, and I kind of alluded to it briefly for a second. I had worked for this in smaller Blue Cross Blue Shield that's in the state that I live in for a little over 17 years. And then lo and behold, because it was such a strong and viable company, it was acquired and or merged, depending on what kind of language you want to use, with a large Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I would almost call it a consortium. And so it turned from one state into a 5-state Blue Cross Blue Shield. And just a little bit of background information. Blue Cross Blue Shields kind of have 2 camps. One is investor owned and one is non-investor owned. And we were on the non-investor owned side. And so at the end of the day, when that happened, they took our little 1,200 soul company and we morphed into a 22,000 employee company, like overnight. And I would say that the challenge there for me was really kind of a disappointment at the beginning. The challenge was that company promised, the smaller company promised certain benefits. One of the benefits that was a big one was if you retired at 55, you would have health insurance for life for free. That was a benefit, in addition to some other pretty rich benefits.
Whoa, wait. Let's
So,
go back to that part.
right. And so at the end of the day, they did a data analysis of those 1,200 employees, and they divided those employees up into 3 tiers. And depending on what tier you landed in, you were grandfathered in, or you got a portion of those benefits that were promised, or you totally lost out. And so they took their criteria that they used was years of service and age. So I lost that health insurance benefit by 5 months and 22 days. Yeah.
Goodness.
So I got a real bad attitude. Mm-hmm. And so that was the moment, that I had to really work through that, because by that time, after 17 plus years, I had some pretty nice golden handcuffs.
Yeah. Okay. So let's stop there, because 17 years of loyalty, I guess, for lack of a better word, and then you're hit with this scenario, and you miss the cutoff by, just a few short months. That's enough to make you angry.
Thank you. I was. Mm-hmm. I was angry for, and I'm not proud of it. I was angry for probably a couple of years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I still performed well in my work, did a great job. But at the time, I learned so much, because who knew that when you're acquired by another company, that the company that's doing the acquiring maps the new employees into their existing structure from an HR perspective, and what level they're at, what their title is, what their pay range is. And if it's not the same, then you hope to goodness that your superiors are fighting for you and going to bat for you and your teams, which they did not.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question. So not only did you have to deal with this corporate restructure, or being merged into an acquiring organization, then you had to deal with the frustration of having your benefits completely changed after having worked there for really a really long time. And now you're recognizing that how you progress might be, or is solely, the responsibility of someone in a different department
Right.
potentially. And they're just looking at black and white numbers, not necessarily your performance, how well you've excelled, those soft skills that we hear people talk about now. That was a lot. So at what period of time was this actually occurring in? Because I know that you said that you were pretty angry for, maybe a couple of years or so.
Mm-hmm.
how how long was all of this going on? Was all of this still occurring during those 2 years where this HR remapping was occurring?
It absolutely was. And what was kind of, I think back on it, and it was such an odd situation, because they chose certain people within the organizations to be communicators out to the rest of the teams, to encourage those team members to, that this is why we're doing it. This is why it's going to be great. And I was one of those communicators. And so my job was to go out, in addition to my regular work, was to go out and let people know that you're going to be fine. It's going to be great. And jump on the bandwagon and just keep on pushing through. Yet at the same time, I'm like, wait a minute. Something happened here where I lost a couple of grade levels. My title changed. But I'm trying to encourage people that it's going to be okay, and you're going to come out of this better than you had been before.
Okay, so that right there is key. I think that that's really pivotal, because a lot of people, you know, the only thing that has changed is that time has progressed, because those same scenarios are occurring right now today, um, where people are just really put in a bind, and now you're the one left to try to encourage other people that everything's going to be great. We just want you to continue to come to work and get all of this work done and accomplish all of these things, but you may not be remunerated the way that you probably should
That's right.
because of these changes, and you may not get the acknowledgments or the kudos that are due to you for the work that you've done that have helped to progress this organization. So, how did you handle that, recognizing, like you just said, that you were responsible to try to encourage people to do a good job and that everything was going to be okay, but you yourself were not actually feeling that?
There were a couple of things that I can pinpoint just right off the bat. One was I believed in the mission and the mission of the company, and we had been told that they were in fact going to utilize best practices when appropriate. And so I knew that my area of expertise, after I'd been there for so long, it had become really a niche area. And I was just hopeful that they would utilize my practices as best practices. And it was kind of like, by golly, I'm going to make it happen. Right. So it kind of spurred me on a little bit. And then I think the other thing that got me through it was, again, that this company actually was probably one of the last ones on the face of the planet that still had a pension profit sharing.
Yeah, because we don't hear those words anymore.
And for all you youngsters out there, what that
Yeah.
means is it's a privatized retirement plan in addition to Social Security, 401k, whatever. And so that was the golden handcuff, and it actually had some diamonds in it. And so because I'm kind of a jewelry girl, I had to stick with it. Yeah. So those were my two little nuggets that kept me going on that. And the mission. I felt the mission was important to provide quality health care for our members. They weren't insureds at the time because we were non-investor owned. They were members. And that was important to me.
Yeah. Okay. So you just mentioned two, maybe three things that are, I think, some key takeaways just from that example. You believed in the mission. You believed in the mission of the overall organization, and recognizing that people are flawed, and it does not matter where you go, you're going to work with flawed people.
That's
You're going to work with some people who make choices or decisions, business decisions that impact not only the people within that organization, but maybe the people who are being served by that organization. But if the mission is strong, it may be worthwhile to evaluate where you are and if you can continue to serve that organization in that capacity because of that mission. And then you also indicated basically that there were some benefits that were available that you were not going to find anywhere else
nowhere else.
at that point in time, because like you said, as time was continuing to progress, companies started moving away and transitioning away completely from pensions. You don't hear really the words pensions nowadays as a part of a benefits package.
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I don't know if any exist anymore.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times if you hear about them nowadays, it's because they're unfunded.
Yeah, that's a problem.
That is a big problem.
I think what they
So,
call it, one of the companies was Enron. There was
yeah, yeah.
Enron math going on there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We don't want that kind of math.
No.
Yeah. So, uh, the reason why I point that out is once a person finds themselves at a crossroads in their career, they've been a little bit jaded because of what has occurred with their particular position. Something has gone on between them and their manager or them and the HR department, whatever the case may be. It is important to sit down and really reflect how this is going to impact you if you decide to make a change.
Right.
What are you going to gain versus what are you going to lose? You can stay and maybe you only had a few years, and you can tell us about how many more years you had after that before you retired. But it may be that you're near retirement. It may be that you can't find these benefits at any other organization. It may be that you have so much time vested, it's just not worth it. Or, maybe those circumstances are completely different. But the point is, you have to carefully consider all of those angles before you make a decision. And you don't want to make a decision like that out of emotion.
Right. Could not make it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I Thank you for sharing that story
You're welcome.
because it's so relevant. Like I said, some of these things are pretty timeless. And again, when we're dealing with other human beings, we need to be prepared to be challenged.
Well, I wasn't perfect at it because in the end, I did make a very difficult decision based on emotion.
Wow.
But
Wow.
I would not change. I would not change it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about, mind shifts because I know that you had to think through that particular set of circumstances and
Hmm.
scenarios. But tell me what mindset shifts helped you to turn workplace challenges into career defining opportunities.
I would say because I believed in the mission, and I saw some of the changes that were occurring within the organization, that I decided to hunker down and see what I could bring to the table. Again, to that best practice. And in the end, I was successful in that. And the company ended up taking my business model and moving it into a best practice for the 5 states.
Okay, so that's amazing.
It was
That's
amazing.
that's that's not a small thing.
It wasn't a small thing, but I have to say that it was kind of interesting too because I had actually received a phone call from HR offering me 2 positions on the same day, and one was to stay with the state organization, but move into uh, a marketing role over some marketing teams, or to go with the mothership. The enterprise is what they called it, and I called it the mothership. To go with the enterprise, and that had a higher grade, a little bit more money to it from a base salary perspective, but it was the one that was going to take my business plan and move it into the 5 states. And so ego stepped in, and ego said, "Ooh, you need to do that, right?" And
Yeah.
so that that was exciting. I mean, come on, after you've gone to school and you've got your MBA and you're doing all your stuff, and you have this opportunity to really uh, make something flourish because, again, you believe in the mission. That was really pretty cool. But on another point of that was I really wanted to see how it would benefit the company, and to a great extent, the changes that would be made. Having said that, the smaller company that I was originally in, where they made the offer for me to move over into marketing, they took my model and applied it to the marketing division. And then that ended up being used for the enterprise as well. What?
Okay, so then you had the opportunity, having stayed,
Mm-hmm.
or at least recognizing that there was a potential to make a significant impact to the operations of a huge organization. And so, just for those who are listening and or watching, vanity cannot be understated in some situations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sometimes you do things because, like you said, ego, it does matter to some degree, and that can be used for good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
It
it
can.
definitely can be used for good, and it sounds like in that situation you were able to put into process appropriate workflows and best industry practices that were adopted by a number of people across the organization, which had pretty significant impact.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I'll say, well, see, I'm learning some other things about you, Barb.
Well, I know. Well, I try not to think about it too much, but it was pretty rewarding. I'll say that.
Okay, well, it sounds like it. And I guess with it being as rewarding as it was, I'm sure that you had a lot of help getting some of that work done because you had to be able to collaborate with people,
Mm-hmm.
not only within your department, but external to it. So, why don't you tell us about some key relationships, mentors, or even personal practices that helped you maintain some clarity and purpose
Okay.
during some of those difficult
So
times?
I would say that there was there were two pivotal people involved. One was a lady who reported to me, and I knew that I mean, when I first hired her, she worked for a fast food company in the state that I live in, and that was at the very beginning of my career. And I hired her, and I thought, man, if she can do that work, then I know she's got it going on, because she had a work ethic and she was smart. So the way that I approached hiring people is, if they were smart and had a work ethic, I could teach them. So I hired her, and she was my right hand gal. I mean, and we're still in contact today. She is a wonderful human being. And she also knew my idiosyncrasies and my weirdness. And so she would just kind of put up with it, you know? And so she stepped in, you know, she really did. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to promote her like I wanted to, because there were handcuffs within the organization that prevented that. You know, and I will throw this in. Sometimes when people do a really great job, they're stuck because they do a really great job and nobody wants to take it on. And I think that that was one of the things that was a kind of a handicap from that perspective. Then on the flip side, I had another person who was my mentor, and he had been hired in when it was just in the state by the president of the company. And I had the privilege of, because I ended up reporting to a ton of different VPs over time. And he was a senior VP, and he was brought in as a consultant. And quite frankly, I will say that that man was intelligent. He fostered creativity. He never was punitive in any way. And he would use really sharp phrases to communicate with me and get me to think. And we would whiteboard things, and we would throw the Post-it notes up on the wall and figure out what we need to do and how we needed to do it. Just a super creative guy. And to a point, finally, I mean, through this thick noggin, finally figured out, you know, he's got some great lead-in questions, right? And so I wrote them down on Post-it notes, and I found them the other day, and I would put them all around my laptop and, you know, on my desk. And one of the questions or statements would have been, have you thought about, rather than, you need to do da-da.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so he never told me what to do. He was like the perfect psychological counselor, because he would foster creativity and questions.
Yeah, so I appreciate things like that because delivery matters. And when you're trying to present something to someone, and uh, like you said, if you come at them with this pointing the finger
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, do this, do that, well, it kind of puts up that defensive wall and people are not listening to you.
It
But if
absolutely,
you just rephrase it just slightly, well, have you thought about this? It actually works. It
it
does
does
work.
work. I wish that I had had him earlier in my career, because he really helped. Um, Not that they're all gone, but he really smoothed out some rough edges for me, because I'm pretty blunt and straightforward. And, you
No,
know,
you're
I
really
very
good.
easily, you're right. I very easily, you know, I mean, I'm sure I have said to some of the people that reported to me, well, what were you thinking? Right?
Yeah, nobody wants to hear
I mean,
that,
well, just how stupid
especially
are
not
you?
from their boss.
Right? Just how stupid are you? You know, what could possibly made you do, you know, so that's really a great way to win friends. But
Yeah.
yeah, he taught me, you know, have you thought about? Yeah. I mean, I know that sounds so simple, but he was very instrumental.
Well, let me tell you, most people do not live in the simple world, and just approaching people with decency is relatively simple, but it doesn't happen as often as we'd like it to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of interesting.
Yeah. So what you just pointed out is how important it is to um, find some allies or mentors or people who you know that you mesh really well with, because they can actually help to make the difference in your work environment.
And he did. As a matter of fact, after I left the company and I went on to the third party administrator that I worked for, I brought him in as a consultant. And we were going through, because I had 5 departments that reported to me, even though it was a much smaller company. It was a privately owned company. I brought him in and he had some wonderful things that we were trying to work through. But at the end of the day, sometimes owners don't like what's being told.
Very true.
And unfortunately, they didn't implement some of the things that were recommendations. But, that's the way that goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's so far you've just really given some really good information and insight to cause any of us who have, been in a scenario where we think that, okay, it's time for me to pack up and leave. You've really given some good things to consider before doing that. So as we approach the end of our time together, what advice would you offer for someone who may be stuck or feeling like they're stuck where they are and they do think that they're at a crossroads and are really unclear or unsure about how to evaluate their circumstances?
Okay, so I didn't do anything perfectly. Everything that I've learned is through mistakes. And I would say that when I left the company, the thing that caused me to leave was we had a meeting at the mothership, and my superior at the time had all of her management team there, and she looked at me and she gave me a directive what she wanted me to do. And because I was involved in contracting our producers that sold our products, she gave me some instruction, and I looked at her and I said, that's illegal. And she immediately pivoted over to a person who was a subordinate of mine. He reported to me, and she said to him, make it happen. Well, and he knew it was illegal because he had formerly worked for a state department, and I hired him from that state department. So he knew, and he made it happen. So my point about that is morals. A moral compass is really important in a scenario like that. If it's illegal, moral, or unethical, any one of those 3 or a combination thereof, it's time to make a change. And so I had 2 more years before I was going to hit the golden and diamond handcuff age of 55. And so I worked for 2 years under duress, really reporting to these people. And at the end of the day, I pushed through, and I had some folks that continued to work, and I wanted to make sure that they understood everything about this niche piece that I brought to the table. And I trained a young lady, and she still to this day is in touch with me, and she thanks me for having trained her and bringing her to a level of understanding. And so I did not leave the company in a bad light. And I transferred over all of my data to the company and made sure that they had everything possible they could possibly have or need. Whether they used it or not, I don't know. But this young lady, I trained her up and got her to where she was good to go. And so that was a good thing, I think, from that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty, I think this is not really the word that I want to use, but it's a strong admonition. So when you consider the fact that a lot of people may not be in a scenario where they're being asked to do something that is immoral or unethical, but there are some situations where that's actually what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so to understand that you need to delineate between what kind of situation or scenario is this, and how do I operate within it for as long as I am here? Is there something that I can do about it? And because I know you, Barb, I know that you're a documenter. I know that you're very meticulous in your note taking because you're so process oriented. You want to make sure that whatever you have built up, that others will be able to pick up on what it is with that this process, how it's supposed to
Right.
look and how it's supposed to be carried out.
Right.
And because that's what you've done for so long, it goes without saying that you would have documented all of these things that are occurring that you recognize are not so good. Some are good, and it goes back and forth, but you're documenting all of it.
So, as a matter of fact, there were at the time there were limitations on how many emails that a person could keep, because it just sucked up too much, memory for, the organization. But I was one of the people that got to keep emails forever. And I had easily, if I received 200, 250 emails a day over 22 plus years, I haven't ever sat there and tried to figure that out. But I'm thinking, if not tens of thousands, maybe.
You kept all of the emails?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I had, the multiple folders, slid them over after I read them, whatever. And then I moved them, to files. So I had all of those, and I had all my processes documented. And so I provided all that. I moved it over to where folks would have access to them upon my leaving. And so there would have been no reason for anyone to have not known what to do and how to do it. And I made sure that the right people knew. On the flip side of that, because I had been instructed to do something illegal, immoral, and unethical, the trifecta, I documented all of that. And so in my exit interview, I provided over a 500-page documentation to HR. Crickets, heard nothing.
Well, that's because they didn't know what to do with 500 pages.
It was unbelievable. Right?
That sounds like a bill from the Senate. Somebody's reading it.
I mean, like, what am I supposed to do with that? Well, I gave them they had a brief synopsis,
yes.
Which, by the way, HR communicated back to the person that I reported to when I called the hotline. And she called me into her office and told me that she knew that I had done that. So let me tell you, that's another side note we could explore, but the hotlines, they ain't so hot. So at the end of the day, the entire organization pretty much that I had that I was reporting to, who really kind of, they used my model after I left. Took about 2.5, 3 years. Guess what? Gone. From the highest executives down.
Yeah, so they got rooted out.
They got rid of them. Of course, all of them are doing great, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, somebody may have pulled out that dissertation of stuff and read through it. I don't know.
Well, it took a while for them to wade through the 500 pages, but it sounds like they did at least take it seriously.
Yeah. And that was good.
And sometimes, that is good. And sometimes you're not going to see the results of the work that you've put forth or the alarm bells that you've rung.
Right.
But somebody will take a look at that and put some things into action. It sounds like those people got moved around. And, the fact that some of them continued on and were promoted into other organizations at higher levels, well, some people get their reward here on this side.
That's a fact. And, and I'm not worried about it because I've been blessed and I'm fine. And, at the end of the day, would I have changed some things? Absolutely. But like I said, I learned quite a bit. So it was a good ride.
That is a good ride. So, I think that's the perfect segue to our close. Because you've given us a lot to think about. And I'm really even more interested and fascinated by your work experience, because I know that there are many more stories that you could tell that would be suitable and very relevant to those who are listening and watching. Just because, again, even though the times have progressed, some of these scenarios have not changed.
Right.
People are still facing them today.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
And unfortunately. But we have choices. We do have choices, and we choose our attitude when we report to some of these employers. in some of these circumstances. We control how we see things, we control our behavior. So I would say, as we close out, number one, thank you for sharing just a small part, not a simple, but a small part of your career
Thank you.
and some of your experiences, because I do think that they're helpful. And for those who are watching and listening, just a reminder, when you evaluate where you are and because you're at a crossroads, consider why you're there. Consider the mission of the organization. Is that important to you? Can you continue to serve in whatever capacity where you are in a way that is going to assist with moving that mission forward? Are you being asked to do something that is illegal, immoral, unethical? And do you have people that you can consider allies there in that workspace? And not only that, I would just add this: it's important um, to have a council of people around you that you can talk to. So seek those people out. If they're not at work, seek them out in your personal life, because you do need somebody that you can talk to help you work through some of these things. And choose those people wisely, because you don't want to just take advice from anybody. Yeah, I think that should go without saying, but it really is important. I used to tell my daughter all the time when she was a little kid, if you want to learn how to bake a cake, you go to a baker. You don't go to the landscape person. You want to go to somebody who has experience in a particular thing, because they're going to give you more realistic and relevant information to help you. So thank you so much, Barb, for joining me today. And I think that in the future we'll probably have the opportunity to come back together and explore some other aspects of your career journey, so that we can glean some additional wisdom and counsel from that.
Awesome. Look forward to it.
Thank you. So, for all of my listeners and watchers, thank you so much. That is a wrap for today's show. And just a reminder that every choice calls for action and every challenge fuels the journey. So, just keep moving, keep going. And until next time, we'll see you soon.